This is a Renegade Media Network podcast.
A lot of you guys that listen to this show are trying to figure out how to create content or create a virtual online business and kind of do it outside of the confines of the system, if you know what I'm saying. Well, I've got a company that's helping you do exactly that. It's privacypost.io. They're a privacy by default virtual mail and business center designed for the location independent, expat, and international entrepreneurs seeking financial freedom. Their services include, this is so cool to me, a virtual mail box, obviously, a professional business address, privacy trust services, company formation, a Portugal D7 residency, and check this out, a virtual residency in the privacy-respecting and income tax-free state of South Dakota. PrivacyPost.io protects you from third parties, protects you from overreaching government agencies, and from complicit cloud platforms invading your private, personal, and business information. Privacy is something we all value, right? It's freedom of association, expression, commerce, and mobility. If you want to start a business online, go check out privacypost.io. You can basically work outside of the confines of the system that none of us like to work within. Go check them out at privacypost.io for more information.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to another episode of the Counterflow Podcast. Always great to have you guys joining me yet again for another week. If you're brand new to the show, welcome, and I hope you guys hope you enjoy what you hear, and feel free to go back and listen to older episodes of the show. I will say, last week's episode, I mentioned it during it, but that was one of my favorite interviews in quite some time. If you missed that, I strongly urge you to go back and listen to that interview with Dr. Mark McDonald on the mass delusional psychosis that's happening here in America as we speak, probably in many other countries as well. Whatever the case, yeah, go back and listen to that one if you missed it. As for this one, so with podcasts like mine, and certainly some other ones, sometimes we have the tendency to get caught up in these abstract discussions and these theoretical points we're trying to make, and discussing books that are very old and have these great points that if we had this certain world that we lived in, then imagine XYZ, how it could really be happening. And then you get into the real world and it's like, wait a second, we're not in these pretend abstract worlds that these podcasters are always talking about. Let's fix some problems here on the ground. How about that? So I try to not get too abstract in my episodes, and let me know if I do. I always appreciate feedback. I've got two people that I would consider at least acquaintances, if not friends at this point. They've been listening to this show for a long time, and that's basically how I met them. They do not know each other. At least before this episode, they didn't know each other. And I want to explain this to you. So Anthony Raimondo, that's one of the guests. You might know him if you're a Twitter person. For his name on there is 49 Acres of Freedom. He can be quite feisty on Twitter, but what he is in real life is a very giving person and giving of his time. He's a lawyer in Northern California, and he has done so much work for free, pro bono, that I really wanted to bring him on and talk about a real person that's actually doing real work for real people, not abstract arguments and discussions and theoretical things that we could imagine in this and imagine that, but a real person that's actually on the ground helping people. And as a lawyer, over the COVID years in California, as you can imagine, lots of lockdowns, he helped so many businesses keep their doors open. He fought this COVID regime in court for free and won just about all of his cases. Really, really cool thing. He did so much more pro bono work other than that I didn't know about that we discussed in this interview. He is also now doing exemptions for vax mandates. So if you need a religious exemption, we get into that in this interview. He's going to give his information here at the end of this episode. He's now doing that pro bono. Really, really cool that he's doing this stuff. And my friend Joni McGary is here with us as well. Joni was one of my first sponsors back in the day. You probably remember Lucky Guy Bakery. Her and I have really kept up a nice relationship. I would call her a friend at this point because we text somewhat often. And what she's doing, she has a son going to college, and she thought, why are they mandating a vaccine for my son? I don't want him to have it. He doesn't want to have it. Then they're mandating the boosters. So she said, well, I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to start organizing a bunch of people to fight this. She started the ball rolling, and I don't think that she expected it to become so big so quickly. She's now been on Fox News several times, and we get into that as well. But yet another person who's not doing anything for popularity or ratings or Twitter clicks or likes or, promoting their own site or whatever they want to, making these big promotions on Twitter and come look at this, come look at that. She's not doing any of that for herself. She's doing it for other people. She doesn't want colleges to mandate vaccinations and then boosters. And so this has caught fire extremely fast. And that is because there are a lot of concerned parents out there just like Joni. So yet another person who's giving their own time to actually benefit people on the ground and make a real difference. I've got both of them here, and I'm so happy to do this episode. Real people actually doing real things for other real people. Anthony Raimondo is here with us, and Joni McGary. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll do maybe just to have proper etiquette. I know Anthony and myself, we're gentlemen, so we'll do ladies first. Each time it's an open mic, so to speak. So I've got y'all here because I know both of you from Twitter, which is a funny thing these days, but more and more common. And I've gotten to know both of you. Anthony, I met you in person, of course, at the RU Texas event here at my house. Both of you guys are doing things without really getting paid for doing things that actually genuinely help other people. And in a world of podcasting that I'm in, I know that some of us can get caught up in kind of abstract conversations about books and authors and what if we had this and what if we did this. And a lot of times I try to keep both feet on the ground, but that gets hard. I understand that, I get caught up in this too, but both of you guys are doing work on the ground. So that's why I have you here. We'll start with you, Joni. Ladies first. Talk about this project you've got going. And well, I should say you've been a listener and a supporter of mine for a long time. You just started doing what you're doing. Your Telegram group has surpassed mine. You've been on Fox News a few times. You've been on Jeff Deist's radio show. My goodness, this happened quick. The ball really got rolling. So talk about what you're doing now.
That's been all in the last 3 weeks, actually. I am a concerned parent, first and foremost. I have a son at Dartmouth College, and 3 weeks ago, I became very, very concerned about these college mandates that were being put in at over 325 colleges around the country. So I started to think about how I could form a little group of like-minded people. And so I tweeted out from my tiny Twitter group that I was going to form a group of like-minded parents who were concerned about these college COVID vaccine booster mandates. And so I figured we might get 10 or 20. And overnight, we had 80 people who direct messaged me. And now 3 weeks later, we have 2,200 people on our Telegram group. And so what I learned was just by raising my hand and speaking out, other people then felt empowered to come forward and say either, I need help or I can help. I think a lot of people are really afraid to speak out at this point about this issue, especially in the college community. So all of a sudden we have this large group of parents around the country who are working very hard to support each other in protecting their children against these college booster mandates. That's the short answer.
Okay, real quick, we'll do it at the end, of course. I always do the
Okay.
plugs, but I wanted you to get the website and the Twitter stuff out right now up top so people can remember this.
Okay. Our website is nocollegemandates.com, and it's a very simple website. And from there will be links to other resources and links to our Telegram group, which I would invite you to join that if you have a stake in this situation at all. There's tons of great resource there. And then our official Twitter handle is at Free College Kids, and my Twitter handle is Lady Spalding 11.
Let me ask you this: what percentage of universities and colleges are requiring things like mandates and boosters? I suppose at this point it is a booster, but what percentage are requiring this?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I should know that. I don't. I can tell you that there are at least 326 colleges around the country who are mandating boosters. There are many more who have mandated vaccination for matriculation in the fall term who are not mandating, but they are strongly recommending boosters. But it's the 326 that we are focusing on in the short term. But even after these deadlines pass, our greater goal is to stop this, because if we don't get this stopped, then in the fall, we've got another booster. And in next spring, we have another booster. There's nothing to say that this won't go on, and it's completely unacceptable.
Well put. Anthony, Raimondo, let's bring you in. Talk about what you do, and then we'll get to some of the pro bono work you're doing as well.
I'm an attorney in California. I operate a small law firm. I have 4 lawyers who work for me. And for over 20 years, I've been representing mostly family farms and family businesses, defending them from a variety of different claims, a lot of which are state agency, administrative agency, various types of regulatory and compliance enforcement, mostly related to labor laws. When the lockdown started way back in 2020, the place where I am in Central California is one of the redder parts of California. So we've been fortunate that we've been freer than most of California. But we did have a hard lockdown here. And early on in that, I attended a protest right here in downtown Fresno at our city hall, mostly initiated by small businesses who wanted to stay open. And I saw a local business here being harassed on the news by code enforcement. And it just struck me as wrong. So I got involved in providing free legal services to represent businesses who defied the lockdowns here, got cited by code enforcement, and we started filing appeals and challenging those citations, those tickets that the city was giving out, and pushing back on that, just because I felt like I had to do something. And I'm a small business owner myself, and I was blessed by the magic government wand that they said my business was essential. And to me, everyone's livelihood is essential. So from there, I've kind of gotten hooked into a network of people here locally, and I've been trying to help folks out throughout this madness that's going on.
So when you're fighting for these people that are threatened to have their businesses shut down, is it something easy? Because when it's something bad, like for instance, we're in Texas here, we've got an executive order from the governor that says you can't require a vaccine for a business, for any entity. And everyone says, well, executive orders have no teeth. And it's like, well, that's when I want it to have teeth, is for something like that. And then I fear that there's this thing, maybe in California, where you try to fight the government coming after a small business, and then all of a sudden the government's got the teeth. Is that the case, or are you winning some of these cases?
When it comes to the citations that were issued during the lockdown, we actually won all of them except one. And not only did we win them, but the government just backed down and walked away from it. So a lot of this comes back to understanding how this stuff works on the ground. And it's hard to believe as we sit here in 2022, but we actually do have rights against the government. And one of the most powerful rights that we have is our right to due process. The government can't just walk into your business and say, you're breaking the law, pay me. There are legal requirements to all of this. And entities like code enforcement are not used to being challenged because local code enforcement citations are rarely challenged. Usually either the violator disappears or they just pay and they move on as part of the cost of doing business. But they have to give you a right to a hearing and a right to present evidence and a right to see the case against you. There's a whole procedural body of law that if they want to take your money or they want to close your business or they want to deprive you of your freedom, they have to give you that due process. And what we discovered here locally was when we started filing appeals to these citations, they really had no mechanism to conduct those hearings. Number one, they had a couple of people that were appointed as hearing officers, but I don't think anybody had ever actually done a hearing here. Number two, they kind of knocked their own feet out from underneath themselves because they didn't have a remote like Zoom setup or anything to be able to conduct these hearings, and they had shut everything down. So we essentially backed up the system. And this is one of the things I learned. I started my career as a public defender. And one of the things I learned very early as a public defender was our most powerful tool as public defenders was our ability to shut down the system. In any criminal court in this country, if the public defenders plead everyone not guilty and everyone demands their right to a jury trial, the court system will collapse tomorrow. They don't have the capacity to handle it all. So what we really did is overwhelm the local authorities' capacity to prosecute these citations. And ultimately, partially because the political wind shifted as the state reopened, it became less of a priority for them. And there really was no political loss. Nobody knew that they just backed down and dismissed all these citations. So a lot of times, the lesson from this is that first step of pushing back is the most important step that we can take. They're not as strong as we think they are. They depend upon our cooperation and compliance. And these systems break. When everybody says no, these systems break because they don't have the capacity to provide that process that they're required to provide, and they can't escape from providing. The one case that we were not able to defeat was one where the citation had already been issued. The government was very hot on this local restaurant because there was actually some powerful video that went out on our local news because the customers of this restaurant actually blockaded the door to prevent the code enforcement officers from coming in and issuing the citation. And a man who was a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran was arrested by the police on that day. And it was a very bad look for the city. So they were really after this guy. They were really harassing this guy. He had already done the hearing with a different lawyer and lost the hearing by the time I got involved. So we have been in the process of defending a future citation and appealing the initial one that he lost. And we're sort of jammed up at the Court of Appeal right now, playing chicken with the government and saying, we're not backing down. They've offered to settle it with us, but to settle it, what they want is for him to agree that if there's another lockdown, that he won't violate, that he'll close down. And he won't do that. And I've told him not to do that because we need to stand against this and stand firm against it. So on that one, we're still playing chicken. We had another one that was actually an ABC, which is our alcohol licensing entity, issued a COVID citation to a local business here. And on that one's much more complicated. We've done the hearing on it. We haven't gotten a decision yet because there's large questions as to whether the alcohol enforcement people have any right to enforce this type of public health lockdown. And we've argued that it's not a violation of alcohol regulations, and there's no basis for them to even assert their jurisdiction in this area. So just because the government tries to do something doesn't mean they know what they're doing, and it doesn't mean they're competent at doing it. And we've seen that throughout our process here in Central California.
And when you were doing that representation, was that pro bono?
Yeah, I've never charged anybody for it. These are the types of businesses that I was representing are very small businesses. I mean, little restaurants. We represented a laser tag studio, where you go and you play laser tag. A couple of nail salons, hair salon type businesses. These are all very, very small businesses. The type of businesses that I wouldn't ordinarily represent, because honestly, they're so small, they're usually below the radar of these compliance issues, and they can't really afford lawyers. So I did all this free of charge.
Wow, really cool. Joni, let's get back to you on this. What kind of, we mentioned that the ball just started rolling so quickly.
Mhm.
And just within tweeting about it, like you got all of these responses. What's the overwhelming sense of fear that you're getting? Or are parents scared about this? Are parents pissed about this? Are they hopeless? What's the general feel that you get from the responses that you're getting?
Well, it's really interesting. When I did two outreaches, and the first one was on the Dartmouth Parents Facebook page, which is peopled by people who are not of like mind for individual rights. I mean, the overwhelming sense of that group that I could tell was, first of all, I got reported for starting this string of controversy, and secondly, it was like we need the boosters because we need to get back to normal. So it was just like whatever it takes to get back to normal. And I think it's not malevolent. It's just there's this belief in the party line, right? The
Mhm.
people who have heeded the call for fighting this, these parents are all of those things. They're angry, they're afraid for the health of their children, they're um, frustrated. And as I was listening to Anthony about doing due process and having leverage there at the college level, you're dealing with a bunch of stonewall. I mean, in general, I think stonewalling bureaucrats, right? And I will say, my son's college has done a better job than just about anyone I've heard of in terms of at least responding. But when you raise a legitimate issue, and I'll give you an example. For instance, okay, first of all, 98% of these kids are already vaccinated because they were forced to get vaccinated to matriculate in the fall. Okay, so they're vaccinated. A lot of them, especially by now, they've had COVID. I mean, I think there are probably 1,000 kids on my son's campus, and there are 4,000 undergrads who have COVID since the 3 weeks that the term started. So you have a high level of hybrid immunity. These kids do not need these vaccines. They don't need them. They're medically not necessary. They're not indicated. And I would argue that the whole population of students don't need to be boosted. They're already at about zero risk from illness or death from COVID per CDC data. So this is a population that does not need this medical intervention. And may I add, these medical interventions are there's no long-term safety data. There cannot be because they're very new drugs. They are novel drugs. They were rushed through development. We don't know what multiple dosing of these will do. And further, there is a risk profile associated with these shots that is unlike any other vaccine that has been developed in the past. And in particular, at higher risk are young men right in the sweet spot of college age. And they have a risk of vaccine-induced myocarditis or pericarditis. And for people who don't know, that is a heart condition. Myocarditis is swelling of the heart muscle. Pericarditis is inflammation of the sac around the heart. And they're brushed off as being transitory or mild, but they are neither. So this group is being forced to take on this risk and get vaccinated with something they don't need. So the parents are very frustrated. And in our case, and in many other parents' case, I'm learning, you approach the university with real data, right? We put a letter in with data, 50 pages of supporting documents, specifically challenging the risk-benefit profile, the risk-benefit analysis, right? We asked, what was your risk-benefit analysis? Did you take into account these things? Please provide us this. We'd like an interactive discussion. And these are things you can't really argue with. You can't. These are, it's real data, really legitimate data. And what you get in response is either nothing at all, you get completely ignored, or in our case and in a couple other cases, I know Cornell did this, you get a letter that's basically doubling down on what the CDC says. The CDC says that boosters are the best way to keep our population safe. They're the best way to protect vulnerable members of the community. And you just get a stonewall. So you don't really have due process. And then they also say, by the way, tuition is still refundable if you want to leave. They do offer religious and medical exemptions. So there is an individual way out of this. But let me tell you that first, let's talk about medical exemptions. In a Senate testimony the other day, there was a doctor from California, I can't recall his name. He talked about the very real issue of doctors being pressured from their medical boards to be very, very careful in how they write medical exemptions. So they feel like their hands are tied. And I can tell you, it's really difficult to get a doctor to write a medical exemption, even for kids who have had bad reactions from their first round of shots. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two, a lot of parents don't realize that religious exemptions are open to them, and they feel that they need to have some kind of lifelong, profound, structured religion to submit one. You don't. It's a matter of conscience, and you can even submit one if you have had a past vaccine. The challenge on that is what I'm seeing across the country is it's university dependent on how easy it is to get that approved. Some people push back. I know a lot of kids who have had theirs rejected. So the frustration of having no due process to really challenge this is difficult for all the parents. So we're trying to attack it on a university by university basis. We're trying to help individual parents and students protect themselves. For instance, this morning, I had a call from a frantic mother. Her son had COVID. He got really sick the first time around, and he's been terrified for the last 6 weeks that he's facing down this booster mandate. She had no idea what to do for her child. And then there's a second parent at the same school. Her son has a heart condition, bundle block. I can't remember the last part of it. He shouldn't be boosted. And she can't get an exemption. And he's already had COVID. So, and these kids don't want to quit school, so it's highly frustrating. But I think it's going to require repeated pushback against this. And one key thing is that the kids have to stand up. People have to walk with their dollars. There are many universities that don't require vaccination. We're putting together a list of them. We're pressing back on, advisory organizations. We're trying to, figure the follow the money thing. There's a lot of activism to be done. We're just getting started. That was the long answer.
No, that's a good answer. And it's funny, in the past, you think of college campuses as being places where there is pushback and protest, and it doesn't seem like there's enough specifically for this issue. Are there organizations, even we can go political parties or anything, that are reaching out to you, Joni, to help with this at all?
There's not really a political divide on this, although I will say that, well, actually, let me walk that back. There probably is a political divide on this. I think that, first of all, there's no organization reaching out in any large way to help. I have had tremendous reach out from, individuals who saw me on Fox or who have discovered the movement. And, they feed me lots of data. They've connected me with, movers and shakers in the medical community. So there has been that. And I think if you, like what you said about the pushback on college campuses, this is a generation of students who has really been raised to be compliant. They've been well indoctrinated in terms of, wanting to get ahead, wanting to achieve. And in that paradigm, it's very difficult to be an outlier. So even though there are many, many students, and I know this firsthand and secondhand, there are many students who do not want to get these boosters, but they don't say anything because there's a lot of peer pressure. A lot of students are all for this, and their parents are. So it's very difficult to get a groundswell of students going, but we're working on that. And I think the kids at the University of Chicago that we talked about earlier at the Chicago Thinker, a couple of whom have graduated from the Mises Summer University, which is heartening. They're really making it happen. So we're going to try to leverage that and call out students in other campuses.
I think I will be having at least one or two of those kids on. It's funny, you see, all of a sudden some young people rise up getting some press about speaking out against this, and it turns out they've gone to Mises University as well. Anthony, you have had some pushback, I believe, in California from people trying to get you disbarred. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's not really related to the stuff that I've done on COVID, but it's just, I have this, how do I put this? I've been a defense attorney my whole career, and I feel like part of the obligation of a defense attorney is to take up unpopular causes. And, some of what I've been doing actually crosses over with what Joni's been doing, because as of late, I've been giving free help to people who are looking for vaccine exemptions. And we've had pretty good success with the religious exemptions, including with a couple of college students. So, Joni, you're welcome to share my contact with your group as people are trying to do things to protect their kids. But
Thank you.
So earlier on in my career, I was adverse very frequently to what I would call a social justice warrior nonprofit law firm that was partially, most of their funding came from federal funds through the Legal Services Corporation, which funds legal aid operations all over the country. And they would target the family farms that I represent and really just brutal scorched earth litigation tactics. Well, one of the things that they would do is represent people who they were not eligible to represent. There's a whole body of federal regulations that govern the use of these grants. But one of the restrictions was that they're not allowed to represent people who are not legally present in the United States. So many of the cases that I had, if not most of the cases that I had, they were representing people who were undocumented and not eligible for these federal funds, federally funded services. So because one of the other things I do is I deal with ICE when they do immigration enforcement on employers, I was able to verify that clients of theirs were not eligible for their services. And then I reported the lawyers to the Legal Services Corporation, the entity that oversees their funding, and got them thrown off of a series of cases. Years later, that ended up with them actually suing me personally in federal court, accusing me of retaliating against workers by trying to have them deported. That case, after some litigation, was settled by the insurance company that was handling my part of it. I represented a group of farm workers in California in the largest agricultural labor dispute since the days of Cesar Chavez at a large farming operation called Gorawin Farms, where the state of California and the United Farm Workers essentially conspired to force union representation on these workers without their consent. The workers came to me and asked me for help because there's a very small universe of lawyers that specialize in this type of work. So it was a short road for them to come to me, and I represented them pro bono. We were able to force the largest union election in the history of the California Agricultural Labor Relations Board. And then the state locked the ballots in the safe and refused to count the votes, claiming that there were improprieties in the election. We did the longest trial, a 6-month trial in the history of the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, which we lost because it was a kangaroo court. And then ultimately, 5 years after I started representing them, the Court of Appeal ruled that it was a civil rights violation for the state to conduct an election on union representation and then simply refuse to count the votes. The court ordered the votes to be counted, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was well over 85% of the workers at this farm had voted against union representation. So we prevailed in that effort. Well, the United Farm Workers Union is a very, very politically connected entity. They're much more of a political entity than a union anymore. They represent like less than 1% of California's farm workers, but they have incredible power in Sacramento. They filed charges with the State Bar of California against me based upon the accusations that were in that prior federal court lawsuit, again, claiming that I was intimidating people from accessing the court system by threatening them with deportation. This past spring, in May, we did a State Bar trial, and in a 40-page decision, the judge completely exonerated me of all of the allegations. The State Bar has appealed that ruling, and I think my lawyer, I talked to her yesterday, is going to be filing a brief on my behalf on that appeal, I think February 1st. If I can, I have a wonderful lawyer. If any lawyers are listening to this in California, if you ever have a State Bar problem, call Megan Xavier. She's absolutely phenomenal, and she's the person you want by your side. So, yeah, that was another pro bono effort, 5 years of pro bono representation for farm workers who had no money, many of whom testified on my behalf at my trial.
That's the part I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned when we did a Q&A here at RU Texas that there was some kind of incident where you needed some people to testify on your behalf, and usually it's someone told you, your lawyer maybe, like, well, someone might get 2 or 3 people like that to come forward. And talk about that part really quick.
Well, as part of this process, first you have to get like letters from people that will say, that you're an ethical lawyer, and then you always have to find character witnesses to testify at the trial. And my attorney asked me to get, clients and other people connected to what I do who would be willing to speak on my behalf. And I asked her, well, how many do you want? And she said, well, get as many as you can. So I started asking clients, other lawyers, people that I work with, if they would speak on my behalf. And I stopped at like 50. And, I gave her this stack of letters and I'm like, is this enough? And she's like, well, usually I struggle to get like 2 or 3. She told me
great.
One client of hers they should ask him about like pro bono or charitable work. And he had like volunteered for a board of directors at a country club. And I had this 5 years of representing farm workers in this civil rights dispute. And like, she had to tell me it was too many. And I mean, I had wonderful testimony at my trial from clients, from lawyers who knew me, and really compelling from the farm workers who I had helped, because I became friends with these people over the course of this 5 years. And one of the really moving moments in my trial was one of the workers was testifying, and he actually testified that when he first met me, he didn't trust me at all because he thought, oh, this white lawyer is going to be some racist. How's he going to help us? And he said at the trial, he testified that he was totally wrong about me and that I had shown him what I was worth. And then he sort of impromptu started crying and said that I had helped him, which is true. We had helped him fix his immigration status to become legal in the United States. And he started a small business, and he now operates a small business as a business owner. And in tears, this very strong man, fighting back tears to testify about how he wouldn't be doing what he was doing if he hadn't met me and I hadn't been willing to help him. So other pro bono work grew out of meeting all these folks. I mean, they're an amazing group of people because they were not activists. These were people just working, and they didn't want to give a piece of their check to a union. And they wanted to be heard about what they wanted. And they organized themselves, and they had protests, and they caused strikes, and they went out in the streets. And I mean, it was such a remarkable experience. And then we ended up helping some of them with different personal things that came up over time, including this one gentleman's immigration status. So that was a really powerful moment for me personally, that, something that I had done without any expectation of, benefit for myself had really helped this person in their own life.
I want to tell you about your one-stop shop for all things CBD, and they've got a brand new website for you to check out, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. And it's the Paloma Verde store, of course, owned by a great couple, Carlos and Vanessa, out of San Antonio, Texas. Carlos is a very bright young man. I can tell you why. Once you go to the new website, PalomaVerdeCBD.com, you'll realize that he's smart enough to feature the better looking of the two on the brand new website. And you'll see what I mean once you go there. They've got everything you need as far as the world of CBD goes. You can explore their products on the new website page. You can see obviously they've got the tinctures, but they've got mint tinctures, they've got soft gels, they've got CBD gummies, multiple flavors of those, the salve stick, the sleep bundle, which I'm going to have to check out. I've not had the sleep bundle yet, but that sounds enticing to me. The menthol sports cream, I can tell you, works amazingly. I've used that multiple times. And one of the biggest fans I personally know of Paloma Verde CBD products is my French bulldog named Lux. He's about 10 years old now, which in dog years makes him like 70 or something, right? He's old, and he gets around like a little old man with his back legs a little bit slower than they used to be, until we started putting the CBD pet products that they have at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. We put it on his food every morning. They also have these dog treats that we give him, and it's amazing the job that the products have done for Lux, my French bulldog. Now he's trotting around like he's young again. He gets in and out of the doggy door with ease, which is a relief to me, I can tell you that. So, of course, I've got a promo code for you. It is BUCK, B-U-C-K. When you enter BUCK, the promo code at checkout, you get 25% off of all of your orders over $75, which is a bargain. That's over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com, their new website. Promo code BUCK, get you 25% off all orders over $75. Let's get back to the show. Joni, you and I have texted and communicated often over the last couple of years, and I would describe your mood prior to the last month or so as black pilled a little bit, pessimistic about things. There's been some ups and downs, and I've felt it through our text conversations. But you do seem more spirited and optimistic since you've kind of jumped into this stuff. Has that changed for you? Do you sense that as well?
I was wondering if you had asked my husband to describe that, because that's exactly what he says. Yes, absolutely. It's something that I just want to say to everybody, really. I was really despairing. And, if I stop and think about it, there are many, many things that are happening that are very concerning, especially in this COVID theater that we're operating in. But the action of deciding to speak up, even though it takes courage, because most people are pretty mainstream people. I mean, you look at me on the outside, I'm very mainstream. But the act of speaking up and then having people come to you and say, thank you so much for speaking up. I'm going to raise my hand too. I'm here too. And then getting a group of people and realizing that a lot of people want to do something, but they really don't know where to start. They don't know they can start, right? I had somebody say, if there was a petition on this, I would sign it. And my response is, you are the resource. You are the writer. You go do it. Here's how. Here's what I did. You go do this. And it's not like some kind of genius, but it's being able to empower other people to find their voice, to realize they're not alone, and to start acting. And like you were saying, Anthony, in that very moving story, you put something out there just because you do one thing and you don't have any expectation that it's going to turn into something so gratifying and so life affirming. But this is exactly what's happened with this movement that has blossomed in the last 3 weeks of mostly parents, mostly moms. And yeah, I am hopeful now because I feel like instead of fretting and instead of tweeting or, complaining or finding people to play Ain't It Awful, which I don't think, maybe I did that. I don't know, probably to some extent. Now I'm acting. And even though I can't fix the whole thing, this one topic, this tyranny that's happening at the college level that could be very injurious, is particularly to young men. I feel like that is one little piece of the puzzle where a group of just people who aren't activists, they're just concerned parents and students, that we can now meet and rise up and chip away at that one thing. That matters in the big scheme of things. It really matters. And you don't realize that until you do it. And so you just go to bed every night and there's like a little victory. When you were talking about the man who was crying because you had helped him so much. In the last 24, 48 hours, I might have said this, I've been contacted by, 3 mothers, and I really was able to point them in the right direction to get the resources they needed to have some hope that they would be able to fight this booster for their particular kid. Now, that's not a victory on the institutional level, but at some point, I think we'll have a victory on the institutional level, And so, yeah, it's very energizing. It's important work. And again, I think the message is don't sit on your hands and think that you can't do something. Now, I don't have any special superpowers in terms of knowing what to do. I didn't know how to set up a Telegram group. My tech guy from my old business, when he saw what I was doing, he called me, he said, you need a Telegram group. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And, and a lot of us are like this, we're women in our 50s. I don't know all these, I don't know how to TikTok. I don't know any of this stuff. And you just learn it and you do it. And that's the message, do something, and if everybody did something, like you were talking about, Anthony, if everybody just said no, the government can't handle it. If all the parents just didn't write the tuition checks or the students didn't go, something would change. Now that's not likely to happen. So we're going to have to make enough noise for all of them. And yeah, I have some hope that I can do something personally. And that's, I think it's a really important thing in these dark times.
Was there a moment where you were sitting on the couch or watching TV or talking with your husband and you said, you know what, I'm going to jump in and start this, and then kind of an oh shit moment. What have I gotten myself into? Is there some overwhelming like anxiety at moments of this?
Oh, my anxiety level is on tilt almost all the time, because sometimes I do feel like, God, what have I done? Particularly when you're getting ready to go on national television. And I have friends and family members who are really upset with me for what I'm doing. And I've had to weigh that, very, very upset. I mean, that's very unpleasant. Most of my friends, are not on board probably with this. But yeah, I have a lot of those moments. I don't think I had any like, oh, I'm going to start this thing. Because I remember I tweeted it. I was knitting. I was sitting on my couch knitting. And the reason this is funny is because I tweeted this thing and then I got a lot of crap about it. Why are you being a helicopter mom and this and that? Why don't you stick to your knitting? So I just took a picture of my knitting and I posted it and I said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm knitting while doing this. So, don't underestimate me, pal. So by the time I get done with this, I'll have a sweater and an activist group. So yeah, it was just one of those things like, I got to do something and I did it. And then I realized what I did and it worked out great.
You don't have to get personal if you don't want, there's family pushback on this for you?
Yeah, I will say that there are immediate family members who are they're completely in a different thought bubble about the CDC and Tony Fauci and what needs to be done in terms of everybody being vaccinated. So it has been a difficult thing to navigate. So having a personal situation or a viewpoint on, say, we don't all need to be boosted versus going on Fox and doing podcasts and doing media and making this message important in the world, that's a step too far. So yeah, it's not easy. And there are many people who are fighting this fight who are also having to navigate family and friends who are not on board. It's not a popular position, even though it's not a radical position to say young people should be able to choose whether they're going to take a medical intervention that is not necessary and carries risks. That's really the basic argument here, right? They should not be able to be forced to take this thing in order to get their transcripts, to have their college education. And somebody could say, well, they don't have to go to that college. No, they don't. But think about a kid who's worked really, really hard and they have a goal in life of becoming a nurse or, becoming a lawyer or, getting their degree, whatever it is. And now you're just saying, well, you can quit, it's okay.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah.
It's a very difficult position for these kids.
Yeah. The left's all about the free market now, aren't they?
Pardon me? Oh, yeah,
the left's
right.
all about the free market. Start your own college. And who would want to see a female speaking her mind? We don't want that either, apparently. Anthony, why did you do this pro bono work for these businesses that were getting shut down? Was there a moment when did you even think about it? Or did you just say, well, obviously I'm going to help these guys out? Or was there a thing where you thought, maybe I'm going to get popped on this or they're going to try to get me or something like that if I go after the powers that be?
Well, I mean, I was already in the crosshairs because the two entities that I had run across that I mentioned before, the nonprofit law firm is California Rural Legal Assistance, CRLA, been around since the 60s and are very well connected in California politics, as is the United Farm Workers Union, the union of Cesar Chavez. So these are like sacred cows in the state of California. So I was actually used to being in the crosshairs because I've been fighting that battle to keep my career since 2013. This all happened with the immigration stuff. The last of it was in 2013. So we're 9 years ago that this all happened. So I've been fighting that battle, sort of being on the outside of the legal profession for a very long time. And honestly, where it really started is I saw these lockdowns happening. When it first all started, like most people, I didn't really understand what was going on with COVID in the beginning. So when they did the initial, like, you got to close it was like a statewide, all businesses, you got to close, it was like 10 days. So I had people work from home for 10 days. And as soon as they lifted that, I told all my employees, this doesn't feel right to me. We're not going to do this anymore. Come back to work. I actually lost an employee who didn't want to come back to work. And I met with all my employees and said, we're going to maintain normalcy here as much as we can. I can't control what goes on out there in the world, but here in this office, we're going to work normally. We're going to live normally. And that's just the way it's going to be. And if you don't like it, then you're welcome to go. I don't want to lose you, but that's the way it's going to be. And as I mentioned earlier, I attended what they call the Keep the City Open, Keep Fresno Open protest downtown. And I heard the stories that some of these business owners were telling. And I met the guy who ran this restaurant, and he told me that he had a young daughter. And he said, look, if I close, I know what's going to happen to me. If I close, I go broke and I can't feed my daughter. They can do whatever they want to me. They can fine me as much as they want. I'll just keep doing it, and we'll see whatever happens with the fines happens. But maybe that ends in a different way, but I know how it ends if I close. And that really struck me, as a small business owner myself. And I just thought, this is wrong. It just struck me as being wrong. And I wanted to do something. So I thought about, well, what do I know how to do? What can I do to help these people? And the thing that I know how to do is I know how to navigate these administrative enforcement procedures and hearing procedures. I know how to defend businesses. So I just started putting the word out to people that I knew. If you get one of these citations, call me. And the very first one that we got was actually served incorrectly. They didn't properly serve the business with the citation itself. And we got it dismissed on procedural grounds. And that kind of gave us a big boost. And I think I would echo very much what Joni said, because it started off, it's like, I got to do something to help people because this is so wrong. And then I started meeting these people, and I actually kind of went down this road of like, I'm going to get some big movement together. I'm going to gather other like-minded people together, and we're going to put a stop to this. And that kind of became a dead end for me anyway. I don't mean to discourage you, Joni, at all. I love what you're doing. But for me, that became much more frustrating and felt very futile. So my whole perspective shift to, I'm going to help one person at a time. And I'm going to help individually as many people as I can. And every business that I save, every business that I keep open is a victory because it changed one person's life for the better. And it doesn't matter if I get attention. It doesn't matter if a movement starts. It doesn't matter if I'm the only one doing it. If I help 5 people save their livelihood, that's more than most people ever do to help other people. So I just started focusing on doing it one at a time and helping each person. And then when the lockdowns ended and the vaccine mandates started, I started just putting it out there. I mean, I think you saw me, I tweeted about it. And I just started putting it out there. Like, if you need exemptions on these vaccine mandates, contact me and I'll try to help you to do that. And through really with help from other people and collaboration, I can't even take all the credit myself. Like, there's other people who collaborated with me who are non-lawyers who were trying to get these exemptions. I cobbled together a really good template for a religious exemption because I found out very quickly, as Joni indicated, the medical exemptions honestly are a dead end because it's almost impossible to get a doctor to help you for the reasons that have been discussed, the pressure that they're under. And the religious exemptions are the ticket. They're absolutely the ticket. And I think there's a combination of reasons why we've had success with the religious exemptions. I think number one, I think a lot of businesses aren't really interested in enforcing this. And the religious exemption just gives them cover to leave it alone. Okay, well, he got it. He gave us a written thing that sounds convincing, so we're gonna do it. But I also think there's weapons that we have behind the religious exemption for people who get denied. And anybody who's hearing this, who's been denied a religious exemption, you got to think about this. They don't get to question your religious convictions in the United States of America. Like, if I have an employee who says to me, I need a certain day off because I'm Jewish and that's a Jewish holiday, I don't get to ask them, well, how serious are you really about your Judaism? Can you show me your record of attendance at the synagogue so I can be convinced that you don't just want that day off so you can hang out, that it's actually because of your religious convictions? And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to call into question the legitimacy of people's religious convictions, which is so clearly a form of religious discrimination that it's absolutely untenable, and they'll never win that battle with you. So I would encourage anyone, even if you're not very religious, you just feel an objection to this, file for a religious exemption. And I don't feel like there's any strategic step that you can take to prevent yourself from having to take a shot that you don't want to take, that isn't valid. Because I keep saying to people, because I have, like Joni, I have friends and family members who think I'm a little crazy. I think they probably thought I was crazy before this, but I've had, well, why is this such a big deal to you? Well, why don't you want to get the vaccine? Why don't other people want to get the vaccine? And my answer to them is, in the United States of America, why is I don't want to not enough? When they want to stick a needle in my arm, why is I don't want that? Why do I need more of an explanation than that? So we've had really good success with the religious exemptions. I've only done a couple for college students, but again, if I can share one gratifying story, a young man contacted me from a Midwestern university going into his senior year, and he said, I don't want to get this vaccine, and I don't want to lose my chance to graduate. You talk about what happens to kids, Joni. Like, here's a young man who's invested over 3 years of his life, and he's in the home stretch to get that degree, and they want to push it. Telling that kid just quit, it's not an answer. And we were able to get him a religious exemption. I got a lovely email back from him saying, I got the exemption. Thank you so much. Well, there's no money in that for me. There's no public gratification. Nobody's ever going to give me an award or pat me on the back or say what a great guy I am because I did that. But I don't need that. That one email is enough for me. If I help save that kid's college education, that's a worthwhile endeavor to me. And I think sometimes we lose focus in, being political activists or social activists and wanting to exact change on this macro level. And we forget that if you turn the course of one person's life for the better, that has value in and of itself. And you don't need any recognition for it. You don't need any money for it. It doesn't need to be a marketing thing for your business. In and of itself, moving one person's life into a better direction than it was going when they contacted you has a value beyond almost anything else. So I don't mind trying to help people one person at a time. And I do believe that here in the town that I'm in, I do believe we made a difference on a bigger level. Since that first lockdown, we never locked down again here, even when other parts of California did. And I do think, maybe I'm too full of myself, but I do think the powers that be in this town thought to themselves, if we start citing people again, that crazy lawyer is going to start appealing all these things again, and he's going to do it for free because they know we did, because they threatened to take us to hearings. They'd say, well, how much is this going to cost your client? And I was like, nothing. We're doing it for free. So go ahead. We'll litigate. We'll do it forever. Doesn't hurt them at all.
Right. Now, I wanted to jump in on one thing you said about the whole individual versus movement. You're absolutely right about that. And I mistakenly call us a movement, but what we really are is a community where we are individually supporting each other and giving each other ideas and resources and helping people from like colleges find their people, because it's so difficult because you don't live in the same town. And there are groups that have broken off. There's a UC group, there's a SUNY group. So yeah, it's all about movement at the individual and the small institutional level, the college levels. And I agree with you. If it's that one by one individual action that makes all the difference.
I'd be remiss for people that, well, they will know because we'll give out the Twitter handle, but Anthony is 49 Acres of Freedom. I'd be remiss if I had him on my show and didn't bring up, it does seem that at times you've had frustrations with political parties. We might have noticed that on Twitter, Anthony. Yeah. Can you speak on, we don't have to name names or anything like that, just because other people do feel this way too. I know that for a fact. I have people writing me constantly with a similar sentiment. What is your frustration with political parties in this bigger picture here?
Well, I think they're useless. They're, so I have a bit, my background is as a young man, I was very left-wing. And that's because I was born in 1971. I was in college when the first Gulf War happened. So I was very anti-Republican because I didn't like the wars. And then, I grew up in the era of, record labels and censorship and, the whole focus on the family, kind of right-wing suppression of ideas and expression. And I grew up in the original era of punk rock. I grew up in Southern California when hardcore punk was really in infancy when I was a teenager. So it seemed like the thing to be was very sort of left. And I got involved in a lot of left-wing activism as a young man in my late teens and early 20s. And I became sort of disillusioned with all of that. And I ended up in my late 20s and 30s and 40s being a proud decline to state voter. I haven't been registered with a political party in forever. And then when I started down this road with the lockdowns and helping these businesses, partially from listening to podcasts, I thought to myself, you know what? These libertarians are saying a lot of the right things and a lot of things that I think make sense. They're going to want to get behind this, and we can build that community of like-minded people through this political party. And maybe there's other lawyers out there that are doing the same thing that I'm doing, and we can pool resources and pool ideas and help more people. So I registered as a libertarian. I joined the Libertarian Party, like national party, and paid the dues and all that. And I joined the Mises Caucus. I guess if I'm allowed to say that, I joined the Mises Caucus and paid their dues, and I actually donated money and started participating in their Zoom calls and their donor meeting calls. And what I saw was the same kind of self-focused uselessness that I saw as a left-wing activist, which was people who weren't doing it for other people. They're doing it for their own status or their own ego. And these people were all focused on how do we do this within the party? And we got to go to this party convention and that party convention. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, but there's people over here who are being harmed, whose businesses are being harmed, who can't make a living. Like, forget that garbage. Like, what are we going to do about this? And I couldn't get any interest there. So I became, after a particular donor call, which I've told you about, where the person who was conducting the call was so thrilled that they had raised enough funds for him to have a full-time salaried position doing his Libertarian Party stuff. I was like, that's not what I got involved with this for. And it's certainly not what I donated money for, was so that this guy could quit his day job. So after that call, I walked away from all of it. I resigned from all of it. I actually had tickets to the California Libertarian Party convention that I gave away to one of my employees. And I re-registered as a decline to state voter, no party preference, which is what I am as we speak now. And it was an important moment for me because it made me wake up to what I'm talking about here today, which is I realized that I don't need to be a part of a party or a movement or an entity or a structure, that I can just do my own thing and help as many people as I can. And that becomes meaningful in and of itself. And if something coalesces around it, like what Joni was talking about, she has these like-minded people that are organically coalescing about what she's doing because she cares as a mom about her own situation, and other people came to her for help, and now that's gelling into something. I think that's a lot more powerful than doing it in the other direction, where you have this thing that proclaims to be a movement, but has never focused on actually benefiting individuals and helping individuals with their own situation. And I said to one of these libertarians once, I said, if you want to build a movement and you want to grow credibility, save somebody's business. They'll be with you forever then. But I just saw no action there. And I thought it struck me very well what Joni said earlier about when you asked her about being sort of black-pilled, how good it felt to be taking action. And that hit home for me, because that's really, to me, what this is all about is what can each of us do, whether you're a mom in her 50s or a middle-aged lawyer with a small law firm. Like, what do we have that we bring to the table that we can do to make a difference in somebody else's life by taking action? And it's not going to be the same for everybody. But I think every single one of us can do something for somebody else. And if we do, that's where the course of things is going to change, not through a political party.
Joni, did you have any frustrations with political party action at all?
Well, I noticed that when this whole situation happened, and I joined the LP, I was in the Mises Caucus, sort of nominally, and I just thought, this is the moment, right? I mean, this, what's happening with the lockdowns and the restrictions and the government grab of power, like the moment is now. And instead, it devolved into this hissy fighting battle between the different factions of the party online. And, people I really respect, I just got disgusted. And I thought, what are they doing about it? They're not taking the moment to put into action what they actually purport to believe in. So I just decided I wasn't interested anymore. And I actually felt like if you're going to be politically active, that right now, I think what you have to do is you have to vote as conservative as possible. If you want to right the ship by voting, that's my opinion. But I agree with Anthony completely. I think that we are in a moment, and if everybody just says, what can I do? And they do something to either help an individual or to right a wrong collectively, and I hate that word, but what ends up happening is something happens and things start to shift. And I believe that what we're doing in our group individually will start to shift toward change. Maybe not now, but by maybe next fall, the narrative could be a little different. And at least there would be an established mechanism by which people would know, hey, I don't have to put up with this. I can do XYZ because these 1,000 people before me did those things and they've shared their experience with me. And so I had that same experience. I became very disillusioned with, people who were just sitting around talking and arguing about, philosophy. It's not useful to me or anything, it's not useful.
Are you optimistic now?
About things in general?
Just generally.
I hope that I'm seeing it clearly that things might be turning a little bit. And it's hard to know because, you get in your silos of like-minded people and you think, oh, everyone thinks this or everyone can see it. And then you go watch, Lester Holt on the nightly news and you realize what you're up against. But yeah, I think you can't help but be heartened by people coming together and saying, I've had enough. And people who were really into the narrative who are now saying, whoa, wait a minute. This is a bridge too far. I'm not going to do this anymore. That's especially inspiring. I didn't know what was happening at the beginning, but it didn't take too long to say, this is not okay. But to see people who were all in come around, yeah, that gives me hope for sure.
What about you, Anthony?
Well, I think I'm actually a very optimistic person by nature. So I don't think I'm very inclined towards the black pill view of the world. So if I can, I'll share with you kind of what my latest moment of optimism was. Is my older son was home from college for Christmas break. And, what Joni said about this generation being compliant really hit home with me because I grew up in a time where our heroes were anti-heroes. And the whole message was, if they're telling you to do it, push back against it. And I've seen it in my own kids that they don't have that sort of instinct for rebellion. So my older son, early on in all this, had gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I had told him that I thought it was a bad idea and he didn't need it, but he did it anyway. And when he came home from college for Christmas break, all he was talking about is how dumb these vaccines were and how he was never going to get a booster. No matter what they told him to do, he wouldn't get this booster. And that, he's now texting me and sending me little memes making fun of Fauci and things like that. And I'm like, okay, so it is breaking through and it is, they are coming around. And I think there's a lot of signs of optimism. And I think there's a lot of signs of positivity. And when I look at the people who are leading this push for authoritarianism, the Faucis and Biden and Psaki and all these people in this sort of autocratic Democratic Party regime, they don't look very impressive to me. I mean, when I think about authoritarianism, I think about that charismatic leader at the top that captivates the people. And I just look and they don't have that. I don't see any charisma on that side of the line. So I just don't see that this is sustainable. And I think we hit a valley, so to speak. But I do think we are slowly climbing out the other side. And I think better days are ahead. I mean, I have to think better days are ahead, or, then you just fall into despair. So I'm a big believer that we all have a lot more control over our mental state than we think that we do. And it's easy to fall into that place of despair and hopelessness. But I think you have to remind yourself that better days are ahead. And how do we bring about those better days? Exactly the kind of things that we're talking about. Help your neighbor. Help somebody that you don't even know. Do something positive in your own community, in your own small sphere of influence. And it's going to have a ripple effect that goes beyond anything that you see. And for me, there's been so many great experiences. One of them is that all of the business owners that I've met who were standing up against this, and all the people that I've encountered that are like vocally against this, are like really super hardcore, like MAGA people with their red, white, and blue all over and everything, like people that I probably honestly wouldn't have gotten to know before all of this. And they're such a fantastic, enthusiastic, and positive group of people. Like, they lift me up whenever I talk to those folks, because they're really, I can be very cynical at times, being a defense attorney, it makes you that way. But these are people that really believe in the promise of this country. And when they wave the flag or they put it on their truck or things like, they really believe it. And some of those moments have really been moving to me. When I saw people, we all talk about January 6th, all this grim thing. One of the most powerful things I ever saw was when you would see these videos of people spontaneously singing the Star-Spangled Banner on planes flying to DC to go protest against the election. Like, that's people that really, really believe. And that's a powerful thing that I think is starting to come together. And, my wife is a big Trump fan. I'm not a big Trump guy, but my wife loves Trump and that whole thing. And I've told her, and she didn't believe me when I first told her this, but I think she believes me now, that I think Trump was just the beginning of something that's much, much bigger than him. And I see this right-wing populism that is only growing and only gaining momentum in this country as being the biggest tool that we have and the biggest hope that we have for a society that's freer than where we stand today. And I think they're going to bring it about. I really do. And that excites me and it makes me happy, even though I don't necessarily always understand or appreciate their fascination with Trump, the man himself. But what I've seen among them is it's become a tool for them to identify each other. Right? Mm-hmm. When we drive by somebody's house and they've got a Trump flag outside, my wife goes, that's one of my people. Mm-hmm. And she's joking to some degree, but there's also something there. There's something that's happening. And I think he unleashed something that even he doesn't understand that's much, much bigger than him. And to me, that's exciting and it's very positive.
Yeah, I think that there's this feeling, and for me too, it's like you realize I love this country, and that's not something I would have said 4 or 5 years ago or thought to say, but I do. I love this country. I love our Constitution. I love this great experiment and all of the things that are happening that are putting it in peril. I think that when people are waking up to that, I think that what you're talking about, Anthony, is exactly what's happening. There's this re-energizing love of what we have here, and that is exciting. It's very moving, and I really hope we can preserve it as a nation, because say what you want about the country, say what you want about America, I think it's the best thing that's happened. It's the best way to go. And I want to keep it for my kids and their kids. So, and I think fighting the little battles is the way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if America goes, we all have to go to Florida. That's going to be the only opportunity left, or maybe Texas. We'll see what happens this next election. Joni, let's do closing remarks. You can say anything you want. The floor is open to anything you'd like to say.
If anyone is at all concerned about these college mandates, either right now for this term or next term, or they have kids going to college, they're looking at colleges, please, please, please go to our website, nocollegemandates.com. The link to a Telegram group will be there. Join the community, start asking questions, find your people. You will get tools and information that will help you navigate this situation. So, and if you aren't in that cohort, but you know someone who is, send them there, nocollegemandates.com.
And your Twitter handle?
I am Lady Spalding 11, SPAULDING. And our organization Twitter handle is @FreeCollegeKids.
Anthony, closing remarks from you, sir.
Yeah, I would just reiterate what I said before, which is I would encourage anybody who's listening to this to think about what you can do. And even if it feels like something small, if you can do something to help somebody else, just do it and see what happens. And it will have impacts far beyond anything that you might expect when you start down that road. If you need help with an exemption, vaccine mandate exemption, you can reach out to me on Twitter. As Buck said, it's 49 Acres of Freedom on Twitter. Or my law firm has a website, which is www.raimondoassociates.com. You can reach out to us either way. If you are not in California, I'm not licensed outside of California, so I can't provide you with legal representation, even though I can provide you with some resources. If you are in California, We are representing some folks who are being mistreated in terms of the COVID and vaccine regime. And you can reach out to us in that regard as well. But if the only real message I have is just help somebody.
Excellent. I cannot top that. I have to agree with that. I'm really excited to hear. I had not even thought of you helping people in California with these exemptions and stuff like that. I know there are people, I know for a fact, there are people listening that will probably be contacting you because there's been people reaching out to me in California that need assistance with that. So that's very good to hear. Joni McGary, Anthony Raimondo, thank you guys so much for being here. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Buck. Great to join you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I hope you guys enjoyed that chat with two real people doing real work to help real people. I'm so glad to have had that discussion. I'm so glad to know both of these people. And makes me feel like I better get my ass in gear and actually start doing some more stuff because it's very impressive. Thank you, Joni, and thank you, Anthony. You guys, if you would like to do something to help me at all, you don't have to, of course, but if you want to support this show, if you find any value in it, I've got a Patreon site, patreon.com/counterflow. All you have to give is $1 a month if that's what you want. If you'd like to do more, obviously, I would welcome that. I will tell you this, every penny that comes into my Patreon site, I use on this show. I don't go out to nice dinners with it. I promise you, it goes right back into the show. As you guys can probably tell, I've got the best producer in the game. And so I got to pay him. Got to pay my man, Chris. Check out the website, counterflowpodcast.com. You can get shirts there. You can find all of my social media links there. And you can listen to the old episodes there. Twitter @BuckRebel, BuckRebel. Hope you guys are having a great week. I hope this episode made you feel good. I hope it gave you some ideas. And thank you once again, Anthony and Joni. You all are doing the Lord's work. And we all need to get better at doing that same thing. You guys have a great week. Thank you.
You get split in fucking half, till I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been the Counterflow Podcast, a part of the Renegade Media Network.